Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the live stream. We are really excited to have a new video series that we're talking about. We have a great team here together. It is our workers' comp team at Mary Free Bed. We're all sitting in the room together, so you'll see us looking around, talking to each other. But we're excited to be starting this series where we can really dive into the details on how workers' comp is different at Mary Free Bed and how we can benefit and help others out there in the community when they're looking for rehabilitation. So we've got a great roundtable here of experts. We're going to get around and meet everybody. We have Stephanie Anderson. She is the Vice President of Workers' Comp here at Mary Free Bed. We've got Amy Bowen. She is the Workers' Comp Clinical Liaison. And we got Travis DeKruyter. He is the Physician Liaison Lead in working in auto and workers' comp. So thank you all for joining us here in this conversation. Why bring this team together? Why start having these conversations on social media about workers' compensation in the rehabilitation world?
So our team really developed over the last year or so, really stemming from Mary Free Bed's investment in the unique ways that we serve the injured worker patient population. I mean, as all of us know, Mary Free Bed has been treating some of the most complex patients for over 100 years. And yet we do know that the injured worker and the workers' comp industry does require different things, has different goals, et cetera. So our team really developed with the intention of investing in those unique components of caring for injured workers and partnering with our referral sources to do that really well and efficiently. So because we get the opportunity to live in the world of workers' comp really specifically, the three of us are uniquely energized by conversations around, pushing the status quo, really inspiring innovation in this space and fostering teamwork, not only internally, but with all of our industry partners that work on managing those claims. So we're really excited to, start these conversations here today with our, internal specific work comp team, but then also be able to invite in, some of our clinicians for people to kind of get to know, but then also have some of our industry friends who bring different perspectives, insights, and expertise so that we're having really meaningful conversations.
Yeah. We want the viewers, people that are watching or listening to this, to really take things away, so they can bring it back to their work, or if they've got questions, things they can know they can come to you guys and find that out. So Stephanie, but you also had different roles before this one here. Tell me about your role here with workers' comp, but then also your past experience that you bring to the table here.
Yeah. So my role here really is leading kind of all things workers' comp. So operational workflows, efficiencies, how we're serving our referral partners, and then really expanding access and opportunity for Mary Free Bed to bring our clinical value to this space. So I partner with a lot of the leaders across our organization and then work directly with our referral sources, certainly on a national basis, being able to articulate what Mary Free Bed can do, bringing injured workers here for rehab really from across the country. I come to this role as a clinician. I am a physical therapist by trade. I did work for Mary Free Bed for a number of years previously, and then decided to make the pivot into more of the access, care transitions, referral development space. Did that for a couple of years at another organization and then returned in March, leading this effort specifically at Mary Free Bed.
Yeah, and then it's bringing in some of this team here too. We'll go to you next, Amy. So clinical liaison for workers' comp. Tell me about your role and, how you support the team.
Yeah, so I also am a physical therapist by trade. And so here at Mary Free Bed, my main goal is to bridge the gap between any internal and external stakeholders as it relates to injured workers. So I spend time at team conferences on the inpatient side. I spend time with our access team, being able to help get injured workers into the Mary Free Bed system. And then I also spend time in the outpatient division following injured workers and basically just ensuring that we can bridge that gap and be a single point of contact for any external individuals that we may be working with.
Great. And then Travis, your physician liaison, and then you also help support with auto and workers' comp. Tell me about your role with the team.
Yeah, so I've been at Mary Free Bed for just over 3.5 years and supporting a handful of different business development kind of realms of Mary Free Bed. And then it was kind of aligned when Stephanie came back to Mary Free Bed that my focus has kind of been exclusively kind of that auto and work comp. And for our friends that are in Michigan, they can certainly understand that dynamic between auto and workers' compensation. It's where you have one, you often have the other. And so that's why there's kind of that dual, I guess I'll say, role in my title. But certainly as it relates to work comp, I like to just see myself as where Amy's a little bit more like once they're in the door. I often kind of see myself as more externally facing of kind of to Stephanie's point, like as we are trying to just grow what we are doing here at Mary Free Bed, both regionally and nationally, making sure that all of our stakeholders, from case managers, adjusters, to anyone in this kind of work comp world, is just kind of aligned and in the know, if you will, about what we got going on, and try to get them in the door, and really just bridge that gap with them and with our own teams, and again, going back to access and just ensuring we've got good pathways for smooth transitions into our programs.
And sometimes it is not smooth in some places. So we are definitely going to be talking about that. So within this series, we're going to start with maybe some common problems and barriers that people in the workers' comp world run into. And so we're going to go around the table and ask some people some questions, but we want to have this conversation. We can all kind of chat with each other and piggyback on the different things you guys have seen. So Amy, I want to start with you. Workers' comp claims can be so layered, multifaceted, lots of stuff going on. It's really easy for them to create frustrations for clinicians and for administrators. Why is that sometimes?
Yeah, I think, just inherently healthcare organizations sometimes are not easy to navigate. You add the added layer of having a workers' comp claim, and sometimes that can just add some added pressures, and certainly some different expectations and different perspectives. And so you just have different folks that are kind of sitting at the table asking for different things, whether that be the employee themselves, the injured worker, it can be the employer, it can be a case manager, an adjuster. And then you also have your internal care teams that are also trying to provide care for these individuals. And so when you have different people sitting at the table trying to make decisions, sometimes it can be challenging to understand the perspective of each individual that's there, and being able to respect those perspectives and be able to meet the expectations of everyone. And so being able to have that single point of contact, being able to kind of be proactive in your communication, and being able to provide everybody what they need, with the end goal of it all being the same, right? We're all at the end of the day trying to get the injured worker back to work and back to meaningful activity, but being able to really come together, bridging that gap between internal and external, and being able to recognize that even though there are external stakeholders that, need a seat at that table, they need to be involved in those conversations, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to get the injured worker back to their life, back to what they enjoy doing.
Yeah. Stephanie, anything to add to that? I mean, you have all these voices, people talking, like, is it beneficial to have like one person to kind of go to?
Yeah. Certainly. And, I talked about building the team, and that was really intentional. Amy's role was specifically that, to be able to provide a single point of contact, regardless of where an injured worker might be receiving care throughout our continuum of care. They don't have to think about, like, who do I call at the med group? Who do I call with psychology? Who do I call with orthotics and prosthetics? They just know that they will call Amy. And not only do they know that they're calling Amy, they know Amy and they trust Amy and they know how Amy works with our teams. And so, yeah, we build a system that's focused on relationship, mutual trust, but then efficiencies. So that really is meant to help facilitate really efficient partnership between the claims team and our clinical teams.
And that kind of brings us into like a next problem or barrier that sometimes people see, is that a lot of providers or organizations, they might not have a lot of experience with workers' comp. They may lack that experience navigating those claims. Like, what kind of problems do you see, Stephanie, that people run into when they don't have that experience working with those?
Yeah. Certainly when we talk about an inpatient rehabilitation program, injured workers are a subsection of our overall patient population. No matter what organization, what inpatient rehab organization you might be working with as a clinician, it will be, a minority population. Some are, their payer mix is significantly more, but it still will be a minority percentage of the overall population. And so I think it's really important, and it is important for us that we are hearing what resources they need and are making every effort to provide education. But then also, again, bringing Amy on board, she is able to work really closely with our internal teams to make sure they're understanding the claims process too. I think everyone is very busy. Adjusters are very busy. Case managers are very busy. Our clinical teams are very busy. And so being able to provide Amy as a resource to all of them, to be able to bring her insight is really, really meaningful because we get that pleasure of living really solely in the work comp domain. And so she can help meet their needs, take things off of their plate where she's able to. And then you look at like a physician practice or outpatient therapy, and it's more likely that you'll have specialists who maybe really are doing a bulk, if not all, work comp or return to work or functional capacity evaluations. And so Amy gets to, help create pathways and route injured workers and help case managers or adjusters make sure that the injured workers are seen by those specialists. But yeah, overall, it is workers' compensation. This industry and the claims process is different than Medicare or commercial funders. And so having members of your team that can resource clinicians appropriately has been very meaningful for us.
Amy, can I put you on the spot here and ask you, have you ever had a time where you had to almost kind of scramble and they came and asked you questions like, okay, I know the person who to go do this? Like any recent examples where you being that single point of contact was such a benefit and got things done quicker and smoother for the teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that almost happens every day where I get some sort of request. And typically it stems from already having a relationship with that adjuster or that case manager. But sometimes it is totally random of, hey, I have this injured worker. I'm not sure if they can be seen at this location. They live in X location. How can I get them services, or what do you think would be beneficial? So I have a lot of examples of reaching out to providers to just say, hey, this is the information I have. Where do you suggest that this injured worker start? Sometimes it's different than that. Sometimes it's somebody that may be already in our system and they have a referral for something else. And who do I contact and who's the person to go to? And so a lot of my day is spent reaching out to internal team members or departments based on the needs of those external stakeholders and what they need in that moment. And I think we can all appreciate that the healthcare system, healthcare organizations are not inherently easy to navigate, right? Even as we sit across this table and we know healthcare, I think for injured workers themselves, it's hard to navigate a healthcare system. But, one benefit of being in this role is being able to leverage different departments and really work together to be able to just make it so much easier for folks to get what they need without having to make multiple phone calls, reach out to different departments and kind of get punted in different directions. So, a lot of my day is spent, with kind of all kinds of requests and then trying to figure out who would be the best person to help in that situation.
And I'll just kind of add to that too, such the importance of, or just this idea that, we all come to the table with just different expectations and how dynamic these claims can be and just layered, as we like to talk about a lot. Everyone has a different, expectation, perspective of what they're trying to get out of it. I think that shared goal of getting the patient back to work is the commonality. And I think just the importance of coming back to that can hopefully, and I think at many times, alleviate some of those frustrations that can unfortunately happen just in this space. And again, in all of healthcare, because it is challenging to navigate. And I think to that then, and where certainly I think having like good, strong business development kind of realms of your work comp teams is really important of eliciting that feedback from stakeholders. We can have our own perception of what we think they need, but unless we actually explicitly ask, it's not fair to just make that assumption. And that's been one of the really wonderful things that I've gotten to do in my specific kind of seat in this equation is being very intentional of asking like, hey, how is this going? How is this working? Please be overly abundantly transparent with your thoughts on this, because if we can't all kind of get on the same page here, like ultimately, again, we're not working together as well as we can. And so just there's such to do this well and to ensure that everyone is kind of working towards that same goal, we have to be eliciting, and I would encourage teams that are listening to this, you have to elicit feedback from the people that you're working with outside of your own walls, and then pull that internally and work through that.
Yeah, great tip for viewers here. Look for feedback, ask around, check in how things are going. So Travis, we're going to come back to you for another one of our hurdles that people see, problems, is some teams, they might believe that workers' compensation is really just focused on the finance, just trying to save money, and they're not putting the patient's needs first. Do you want to bust that myth for us all?
How did I get stuck with this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny because when I was reflecting on this, and actually it wasn't until this morning, I was remembered of actually a very like real example of this happening internally here. Of case manager reached out to me. She needed help with something kind of immediately. So I rushed over to our inpatient to chat with the care manager of this particular patient. And she wasn't able to answer the question immediately, but she pulled in like a nurse on the floor to come over and chat. And so I'm standing there waiting. The nurse comes in the door, and I don't know totally what was communicated from that care manager to the nurse of reasons to come, but it was very clear that this particular nurse was like, I'm not going to talk to this Travis guy because he's a part of work comp, and he's not here to do me any good, or let alone the patient any good. And there was this like super awkward thing. And then I was like, well, no, actually I work for Mary Free Bed. Like, and so there was just the end of it was just miscommunication, but it led to this, like totally to this question of like, there is some like something to that of, clinicians, and depending on which side of the equation you are on, it could be easy to kind of finger point of like, this is what they're about and this is what they're about. And so that just experience totally led me to like, okay, I think there's something here to just like unpack a little bit more. And I think there's certainly a space, and I know Stephanie and Amy have done a really good job at this, of like just providing internal education for teams. And a lot of that goes back to just kind of keep pushing of like, we are all trying to accomplish the same thing. We're just looking at it in different ways. And I think that that's such an important piece to it, is just that own internal education. And then again, like I go back to my previous comment, like it is so important that I guess we elicit that feedback from our stakeholders, and then we bring it forward to our own teams. And I think the next step to that is not just like bringing it forward to the teams, but like literally getting everyone at the table together. I think there's an element of just humanity to that, of like, rather than just looking at an email of what their comment was, and not, emotion doesn't always carry through in just like the words, right? And so, you kind of did something really cool recently with a group of like a synergy session of just kind of practically like what that can even look like.
Yeah, we did. And they so generously gave their time to sit down with us for a couple of hours. Case managers and adjusters that are managing, specifically catastrophic claims, but being able to have time and space to really even just to walk through, like, what does a typical day look like for you? Or what does it typically look like when you take on a new case? Really drilling it down to basics. But yeah, I mean, I hear you talk, and I just go, what I try to encourage the team to do. And, as we think about like potential listeners, just receiving value from this conversation, I know that, every member of the team has a set responsibility. And I think it's easy to focus on, individually your part, and not understand everybody else's part, or be able to say like, somehow my part is more important right now, or maybe it is right now, at this particular moment in the lifetime of the claim. But just that discipline of zooming out, seeing the other person's perspective, seeing it as valuable, as an important part of the whole ecosystem. Adjusters making really challenging decisions sometimes, managing really large caseloads. Like, it's just really helpful, that discipline, to not villainize any one part of it, but to be able to see how each member's contribution brings the whole thing together. We did create a Venn diagram for education purposes that does kind of outline, distinctly some of the goals of each member of the larger team, claim team, clinical team. And maybe that'll get shared on a future episode or something where there might be, in this conversation.
Make sure you watch for the next episode.
Yeah.
And we'll
see the Venn diagram.
Yeah. And this conversation is great because it's just like in a lot of things with work, like it's life. And we're given some life advice here. Take a step back, look bigger picture, take a bigger world view. And then, like you were saying, Travis, talk to people, get to know more of the why. And it's not just numbers. There are no villains. It's let's work through this together because we all have got the common goal.
I think too, when you for the three of us here sitting at this table, it's easy for us to say like, we'll build a relationship because that's like 90% of what we do every day. But I think also being able to encourage the clinical team members to build that relationship too, and somehow foster that, so that you can have a better understanding. So whether that looks like, inviting external stakeholders into the building, or picking up the phone and giving them a call after an evaluation or something like that. I think encouraging the patient-facing clinicians to be able to build their own relationships with adjusters, case managers, and things like that ultimately just helps at the end of the day. Because for the three of us here, we get to know people really well, and they have multiple clients that we know their life, we know their personal background. And I think that helps us. And so if we can build and kind of engage the clinicians to do the same thing, I think that's, for the better.
Totally. I don't, just even riffing off of that too, and just reflecting, I think we were talking about this yesterday of we bring up the word relationship time and time again in this conversation. And I guess it's kind of humorous when you think about it, but I really believe that there's a lot of like connections to it of the relationships that we're trying to build with these stakeholders within comp. It's kind of funny, no different than any like other dating relationship where it is time, and and there is an element of trust that has to be built, and that doesn't just happen overnight. And trust is kind of given and has to be earned in that sense. And so some of that is just us doing well and as best as we can with our stakeholders, as well as our own internal teams. Yes. Because we can't ask them to do something if we haven't already built that trust with them of like, no, this is really valuable, that I know this is asking maybe a little bit more, making that phone call after an evaluation. And if I just come at that having never had a relationship with that clinician, like I shouldn't expect them to like actually want to do that, or certainly not do that with maybe as much enthusiasm as we would maybe hope when they make that interaction. But again, it just, this dating metaphor, it just keeps coming back in my brain of with these relationships that we're trying to build, and it's time, there's ups, there's downs. And it's just continual like learning, education, and improvement with doing the best that we can to just do this well together.
That's great advice, Travis. And I also think our title of our series will be Dating Advice and Workers' Comp Advice, right here from Mary Free Bed.
Not misleading at all.
Yes. So Travis, our last hurdle that we're going to talk about in this episode, it has to do with the fast-paced nature of this all, because, when you're dealing with people's recoveries, you want to get them the rehabilitation, the recovery they need as quick as possible, but also just the nature of the field is really fast paced. What kind of hurdles do organizations face when they're trying to get someone back to work as quick as possible?
Yeah, I do think kind of even just to the previous question a little bit of this fast-paced mentality, I think can play into that narrative of the insurance carrier doesn't they don't care about this patient. Like they're just trying to get them back to work as soon as they can, even if they're not clinically appropriate for that. And so I think that kind of, even just that aspect of this can like play into that myth. But I think practically, like the challenges that arise is, I think you can get going so fast, and because you're just trying to keep up with the pace of like, all right, my job is to get them back to work, wherever kind of piece of that equation I'm doing that, whether it's from getting like authorization for services, whether it's clinically getting them back to clinical appropriateness for work. I think we can get really lost in the fast pace notion of that all, that we, I guess, counterintuitively don't slow ourselves down to like actually establish processes and what we would maybe say pathways of just whether it's operationally, clinically, administratively, wherever you want to go with that. Of if you can't have really firm, defined pathways, access points, expectations of how these patients get in the door, and once they're in the door, what does that practically mean? How do they progress through the door and then out the door, hopefully one day? If that's not defined, that I think can ultimately just kind of hinder your ability to do this really well. And so it's a little bit counterintuitive that I think it is important to just slow down. And I guess practically, like our team here, like there's the three of us that are having this conversation right now, but we actually monthly we meet, we call it like our task force, if you will, but call it whatever you want. But your work comp, like, and it's a much more diverse group of people than just the three of us that are exclusively in comp. And we have an agenda that we're just working towards, and ultimately we're trying to improve the operational efficiencies of doing comp well. Again, with that shared goal of the less time that the patient is off work and the sooner we can get them back as it's appropriate, everyone is kind of sharing in that win. So I would certainly encourage like our listeners and people that are watching this, like if you don't have even that more diverse kind of like group that is just looking at it clinically, administratively, billing. We have people that are on like the EMR side of things, because everyone has a electronic medical record system that they're probably using. We use Epic here at Mary Free Bed. And we've got kind of our super users that are like, how can we leverage technology to do this better? And so you have to have someone, it's multifaceted. And it's not just doing it better clinically. It's not just doing it better expedited, like authorization review. It's the whole thing. So, that would be my encouragement to people listening. And that's what we're doing. And I think it's worked well, and we've got a lot more that I know that we can do with it. I don't know, those are my thoughts, but.
Yeah, I would just add two things. And, I'm hearing you talk about, technologies and leveraging technologies and ways that we can automate, back-end process. I think that equips our teams clinically to use their time in really clinically meaningful ways. So we have identified some great things within our EMR build that help to do that. And I just know across the industry, technology, AI, et cetera, are really big topics of conversation right now. So interesting interface with potential, people we talk to in future episodes, just knowing that that's really top of mind for people right now. But then also I just want to touch on, yes, efficiencies, and also what I have absorbed and taken with me from conversations over the last, I'll just say, year since I've been at Mary Free Bed in this role, is the growing conversation around the injured worker as a whole person and the biopsychosocial model, and the benefit of really seeing that injured worker as a whole person, really translating to them being engaged in their recovery, which then also expedites the claim closure. So it's just a lot of intersection of different things that I think are meaningful to go like, yeah, there's a lot of overlap, even though, maybe some days it feels that way and some days it doesn't. There really is a lot of overlap. So I'm excited for future conversations with people who might touch on all of these different areas.
Yep.
Yeah, it's exciting to see, the calendar of people that we have lining up, and we're going to be back having these conversations every month. So make sure you guys stay tuned and watch for that. And as we wrap this up, I want to go around the circle here and just let's reflect on maybe one takeaway that you had from the conversation, or else something you think that the viewer might take away. So Stephanie, why don't you start with us? Like, what's a takeaway you had from this conversation?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, the thing that sits with me really often is fostering teamwork and seeing others' perspectives. So fun to talk about it again today, and look forward to those conversations in coming episodes.
Awesome. Travis, what about you? What's a takeaway for you, for viewers?
It's dating, relationships, and work comp. Yeah. It's that relationship part, and that's kind of exclusively or very heavily the part of this equation that I influence, which is really impactful and meaningful for me. But I just keep going back, like, not that I've been in my career for forever long, but it just becomes more abundantly clear that this is a relationship that we're building. I cannot just come to you with like, hey, do this for me, without having done steps A through Z before that. So
awesome. Amy, bring it home. What about another takeover or another takeaway from this do you have?
I think my biggest takeaway is just being agile, open-minded, as it relates to really anything, right? It can be internal processes, external, individuals, processes, organizations, things like that. And at the end of the day, just remembering that like we really are all working towards the same goal of trying to get the injured worker back to work as safely and quickly as possible. But I think if you can, step back and just kind of remember that in those moments and being open to try new things and think differently, that, you're on your way to being successful.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for this conversation, Travis, Stephanie, and Amy. This has been great. We're going to be back on social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasts, where you can listen to this, watch this, and just learn from it. And we want to hear from you guys too. What are some things that you want to hear us talk about? If you have any more questions, information, Stephanie, how can they find out more about you, the team, and Mary Free Bed when it comes to workers' comp?
Yeah, we would love for anybody interested in connecting with us, learning more, partnering with us on maybe future episodes or conversations. We can all be reached at workerscomp@maryfreebed.com.
Awesome. Excellent. Okay, well, everybody, thank you so much for watching this conversation. We'll be back with more. Thanks for watching and stay well.